it's really fortunate that we can meet on Zoom, but one thing Zoom does not do is to let us transmit taste and smell. And so we do have those limitations. And so tonight, we're featuring 3 outstanding, what I would call local foodies, and I hope our presenters don't mind being labeled that. And they will each share a dessert and a libation that features plants, either native plants or heritage plants in their recipes. And as Lynn mentioned, they will be made available then on our website. First, I want to say that if you have questions during the presentations, if your question is for a specific presenter in some detail of what they're telling us, then we'll go ahead and answer those at the end of each presenter. So you can type them into the chat. If it's a more general question, at the end of all the presentations, we'll have a question and answer session as well. So we can handle more questions then. So I wanted to tell you first about Martha Burgess, who will lead off the program, and then she will be introducing the other presenters. And Martha, who's known to many of you as Muffin, has been an active ethnobotanist for many years. She's been exploring the desert, gathering plants, actually growing native crops, and preparing fabulous dishes and beverages of all types utilizing these special plants. And those of you who know her work will realize that this is only a small part of her accomplishments. She is a teacher, a researcher, an artist, and she's always been eager to share her extensive knowledge and experience. And so, Martha, would you please invite us into your kitchen and share some holiday cheer with us on this cold and wet desert night?
Amazingly wet.
Excitingly wet.
Thank you, Susie, for that wonderful introduction. I really should say that a lot of the things that I know about desert foods and desert harvesting, I owe to native mentors, indigenous people that have taken me under their wing. So I wanted to acknowledge them, people like Juanita Ahil and Francis Manuel and others. I want to welcome all of you. I see a number of friends, not just from Tucson, but from farther afield, Phoenix Souls and Ahwatukee, and I see my sister from from Washington State. Ta-da!
Oh, that's exciting.
So welcome to all of you. I would like to start by saying, and essentially honoring my mentors too, that we all are privileged to be here in Structon, those of us who are speaking today. It's indigenous land. Structon, Tucson, is the Black Hill, the base of the Black Hill, kind of the fountain of civilization locally. But we should say that we know we're here and we acknowledge that. I want to introduce my other blog sisters. We are the 3 Savor sisters. Carolyn Neathhammer is a phenomenal author, journalist. She has been for more than 50 years interviewing Native people, Native cooks, and transcribing their recipes, their traditional recipes. And then she's, over the years, invented her own with the native foods, the desert foods. Amy Valdez-Schwem is the queen of mole. She is the creator and inventor of mano y metate moles. She's made days of labor into one little mix that in just a matter of minutes you can do phenomenal moles yourself using a lot of our native foods, our traditional foods. So we'll go in sequence. I'll start, and I'm going to give you some other background too. I see all of you as appreciators of nature, and in particular, most of you are desert rats. I say that most affectionately. I hope that you've had a little bite to eat, because we don't want you to short out your computer by salivating. Although a lot of these recipes, you're going to be glad to know you can justify them as main dishes, some of them, because they're so nutritious. The desert foods have such their richness and nutrients, you can consider many of them superfoods. So we'll share a few of those. So as we eat these wonderful desserts and drink our libations together, I want to give you a sense of communion. I think we're not only together, thankfully, on Zoom, but when we eat these foods of the desert, these fruits of the desert and seeds and so on, we're connecting. We're connecting with our relatives. I mean, Carl Sagan would say we're all made of the same stuff. So let's think about these foods as something really special, because we all know and love these plants. I want to also give you some ideas of references. If you're interested in actual traditional recipes, go to I'itoi's Garden. From I'itoi's Garden, it's available from TOCA, T-O-C-A, Tohono O'odham Community Action, or the library. If you are interested in scholarly info, the best source of all is Food Plants of the Sonoran Desert by Wendy Hodgson. She's researched everything written from the first missionaries and explorers in the Southwest. The other totally fabulous set of resources are those by Carolyn Neathhammer, our second speaker. And this book, it's falling apart. You can see it doesn't have any spine left. It's 50 years old. This is one of the books that inspired me to really dig into awareness of the desert and desert foods. She's also recently published, I don't know if you can see it, A Desert Feast. And it's so fun because she takes the desert foods and does creative, wonderful nouvelle, as well as traditional dishes with that. I have to mention another book that, before we go into that, I'm gonna raise a glass right now because, and I hope all of you can do the same. We have a couple of people we need to remember that we've lost, amazing botanists who've given us so much knowledge, shared so much. Dr. Richard Felger, eccentric, wonderful soul whose life's work is now accessible online. I think it's desertfoods.org or something like that. Maybe you can post that on the chat. And the other one is Frank Rose, beloved of all of us in the Native Plant Society. He shared so much. So let's all tip a glass. I'm going to tip this one. This is a non-alcoholic punch made with prickly pear and my Meyer lemon. So cheers to these wonderful souls, Richard and Frank. Salud, salud, may they rest in peace, but they aren't the kind that rest. They are in our souls and they are with us as we explore the desert. But I wanted to mention Frank especially because he helped, he was an artist as well as a plantsman and spiritual guide. He illustrated this children's book that happens to be by my mom. And it is a plant book for kids. It's the hero in the book. It's called Bo and the Flyaway Kite. And you can find it at places like Native Seed Search or Amazon. But the hero in the book is a plant that we know and love. Okay, I'm going to start with a PowerPoint because there's so many plants that I'd love to use in dessert recipes right now, but you have to plan ahead. As most of you know, if you if you want to harvest something in the desert, you have to know exactly which weeks it's available or days. So I'm going to share my screen and hope that I can find my share and yeah. Uh-oh, where is it? This is my slideshow. Okay, can you see? I just had to put this in because this is what happened today after I don't know how many months of no rain at all. We can rejoice in some rain in the desert. So before we get into this and with our libations and our desserts, I want to thank those plants. I want to have us all acknowledging their gifts. Okay, and I'm acknowledging also my mentor and teacher and my adopted grandmother, Juanita Ahil. She knew plants so intimately, and she would harvest all through the desert and make me say things. When I teach, I like to tell people the words the way she said, you say it. This is pahetach, the fruit of the giant saguaro. And one of the desserts that I'll show you tonight is using the seeds. After I made the saguaro syrup, I sieved out the seeds and I've used those. I've saved them in the freezer and I'm using those. Another plant that I'm using is the amaranth. This is pigweed. To cotton farmers, it's a scourge. And I think that the cotton farmers ought to just abandon ship and just grow the weeds that they're trying to pounce and round up. So it can be used, harvested for fabulous seeds as well as greens. The seeds are so nutritious, 15 to 18% protein. Another one of our staples, of course, in the desert is the velvet mesquite. And the pods, when they're ripe, will fall off the tree and be full of all kinds of calcium and carbohydrates, complex carbs, proteins. This is a picture of Juanita from the early 60s that I obtained from the Arizona State Museum. She parches the beans and mills them with this giant pestle in a bedrock mortar. And it's a lot of work. And in fact, this season with COVID, we haven't been able to get our seeds, our pods milled. So I ended up doing some creative things with my mesquite pods I'll share with you. Okay, a few more of the plants that we'll be using in our recipes are the sweets from agave, the syrup that's a wonderful complex carb. And on the left is Agave Pear, on the right is the Hohokam Agave Murphyi, which we know from Wendy Hodgson's work is associated only with archaeological ruins. And then a not so good picture of a pinon pine, but it bears fabulous seeds, nice, oily, wonderful seeds. And I'm using those in one of my recipes. This is heirloom white Sonora wheat that Father Kino introduced. This is growing at the Mission Garden at the base of a mountain, our beloved Mission Garden. And another plant that only grows in at the end of a wet winter. And so sing the right song so we can have a wet winter. This is wild rhubarb, our desert rhubarb, used as medicine, used as food. That stalk, Juanita taught me how to harvest it at the right moment so it's not too stringy. And on the right is I don't know if you can see that, wild rhubarb upside down cake. You can go to our website, Savor the Southwest, our blog, savorthesouthwest.blog, and search in the search box for wild rhubarb, and you can get the recipe for this. Okay, and of course, festivities would not happen in the desert Southwest without our prickly pear. On the right, I've made a punch bowl with a frozen prickly pear ice block. You could also do a float ice block if you plan ahead with the flowers of Ocotillo, but you got to catch those, of course, in April or early May. So let's head out. I'm going to unshare, and I'd like to show you a few things. I'm going to do more than one dessert and one libation. Okay. First of all, I want to show you and tell you a story. This is an amaranth. Can you see the seed head on this? This is a cultivated amaranth, and from Native Seed Search. And the name of it is Mayo Wewi. And I believe this is the progeny of seeds that Gary Nabhan and Barney Burns and I collected in the 70s from San Bernardo, north of Alamos, Sonora. And I need to chase down the origin of this. This beautiful purple amaranth seed head, which is beginning to drop its seeds, was grown by Emily Rocky, who is the garden manager at Mission Garden and a fabulous heirloom gardener herself. So I thank her for that. Okay, with the amaranth seed, actually amaranth, you can cheat if you don't want to grow your own or raid the cotton farmer near you. You can go to Rancho Gordo. They have the Amaranthus cruentus, not the Amaranthus palmeri that we have everywhere. And you can toast them. You can also go now to Bob's Red Mill and get amaranth flour. So I made festive cookies with chocolate chips, Ghirardelli. I used pinion nuts and amaranth flour for these. They are darker than a normal cookie would be. Oh, and I put cranberries in it to make it a little bit more Christmassy. So it's a darker cookie, but it's fabulous and it's so good for you. You can rationalize that you're eating healthy. Okay. So with my mesquite beans this year, not being able to easily grind them, I ground a few, but just enough to make my next dessert. So here are a bunch of them still. I've had them in the freezer. I put them out in the sun when I first harvested them for a week. Every day, brought them in at night. I wanted to get rid of the bruchids and then freeze them because I didn't know where we'd go from there. I didn't know where the milling would be. So this, it's going to be kind of hard to show. This is lemon squares made with the crust of mesquite flour and the white Sonora wheat flour from Mission Garden. There are other people growing the white Sonora wheat now. BKW Farms in Marana, and you can get BKW Marana wheat through Barrio Bread as well. And you can get Queen Creek wheat from Native Seed Search. So as we go along, if you need to know sources, we can help you with that. But I'd like to, can I do David Yetman sort of a thing? Do you know David Yetman on In the Americas? He's all the time going to exotic places and getting tastes of things. So I'm going to have a taste of my own gooey mesquite crust and lemon squares. I dusted the top. The topping is popped amaranth and saguaro seed that I've saved. I guess I showed you that. The saguaro seeds from my, let's see, that was last June when I made saguaro syrup and then sieved out the seeds. So, oh boy, a little goes a long way. It's so rich. And I used my own Meyer lemons from our tree and some zest from sweet limes that I got from Mission Garden in the wonderfully rich the middle layer of a lemon bar is like a custard. And in this case, I used agave nectar, which made it a little gooier. Sorry, now I won't be able to touch my computer. Okay, you can go to our blog for other things. How am I doing on time?
Well, we have a couple questions. And so, and then I think we'll need to finish up so that we can get all of our folks in. So should I ask you the questions now, or did you have some other?
Oh, if there are some specific ones, you want to go ahead?
Okay. Yeah, it says, is wild rhubarb the species that is called, and I never know how you say this, canagre?
And I've also heard it canagria. Canagria.
And then it says, are there other rumex species that are edible?
Well, of course, they're cultivated rumexes, like grow in Alaska and other northern or high elevation places. But the other rumex that we have in watery places a little higher up in the mountains here are more medicinal, not so much edible. Good question.
And then is it okay to use mesquite pods? Now I have to, just a sec, because there's a comment on this. Is it okay to use mesquite pods that have holes in them from the those beetles,
bruchid beetles?
Bruchid beetles. And then someone else has commented extra protein from those beetles.
Well, the extra protein is if they haven't emerged. If there are holes in your pod, it means they've already left.
Gone.
So all the better. Yeah, if you have any question about it, you can put them out in the sun or toast them in a slow oven, and it'll smell like cookies baking if you do that. But you'll kill the grubs if there are any in there. And yes, it would be protein.
Extra protein.
That's not all bad.
And then a final one is amaranth gluten-free.
Yes.
And someone has
It's called a grain, and grain usually refers to the cereals, but it's granular. It is definitely not a cereal. It's amaranthus. It's the amaranth family, closely related to chenopodiums, but it's its own family and it's totally gluten-free. Yes, a wonderful flour to use in a gluten-free recipe.
And then someone asking about the recipes, and we are going to be publishing the recipes.
Oh, okay, great.
So, and then also they ask if you're going to publish a book soon.
Oh, that's a very nice thought. I need a cattle prod, but I would love to do that. Yeah, I've got some ideas for relaying a lot of the things that I learned from Juanita.
Okay.
So thank you. So may we pass the baton now to Carolyn Neathhammer, author and chef and native foods cook par excellence. Carolyn, we may need to do Carolyn's program as a recorded video because her bandwidth is not good. Can you, or Lynn or Susie, are you going to post that?
I've asked her to unmute. I see her and I think she's just muted. Carolyn, can you unmute yourself? I'm not hearing you. No, you're muted. Carolyn,
We could go ahead and show her program.
you have her program, but I can see her and she's talking, so I keep switching it. There's a little lag, and so I keep asking her to unmute. And are you there, Carolyn? Can you hear us?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. We got
Can you hear me now?
We can. We've got you.
Okay, super, super. Okay, great. Well, good evening, everybody. I was nice for Muffin to give a little bit of a introduction to some of the foods that I'm going to talk about and cook with, because I really didn't give much of a background on amaranth when I did my pre-recorded recipe demonstration. I just have a new book out called Desert Feast, which Muffin says Desert Feast here. Oh, where's my, okay, here we go. And it doesn't have many recipes. It is mainly a history of what we've been eating in the Santa Cruz River Valley for the last 10,000 years. Starts out with wild foods, and then talks about how everything changed when people began to get into agriculture about 4,000 years ago. And then things changed again when the Hohokam culture arose and the people became just super agriculturalist. And then things changed again a lot when the Spanish arrived. And then they changed again when the train came to Tucson and the Anglos arrived. So that's the history part. And then I also tell about what's going on today in Tucson and how we're feeding ourselves and how people are learning to garden. So seeing there weren't really the right kind of recipes in that book for tonight, I went to my previous cookbook called Cooking the Wild Southwest, and that has 23 edible wild plants that grow in the arid Southwest. They're easy to recognize. Their tastes good. They can't be confused with anything that's going to hurt you, any poisonous plants, and they're also easy to gather. So the recipe that I pre-recorded for you is from that, and it includes amaranth seeds and chia seeds. And if we were going to go back to the old ways, we would gather an agave heart, roast it in a pit, mash it up, but we're not going to do that. I just used commercial agave syrup and put it all together. And then I put a chocolate coating on it. And in the book, I call it Aztec Delight, because actually all of those things were available to the Aztecs. And there are a couple of agriculturists who wrote a book on chia, and they looked back and they said that the Aztecs made what they called a dough, which included those things. So this is kind of our modern day 21st century Tucson take on an old Aztec food using Tucson native foods, except of course for chocolate, which interestingly has been around Tucson for a long time. When I was doing my most recent book, A Desert Feast, I found out that actually Muffin had a book that I was looking everywhere for, and it's the letters from Father Segesser. And Father Segesser is the priest that took over Sanavir after Father Kino left. There was a period of time where there wasn't a priest, but then he came. And he wrote these letters. And in the letters, he complained that everybody who came through and wanted to spend the night with him expected hot chocolate. And he says, I'm beginning to feel like an innkeeper. And when you look at the orders for some of these fathers that they put in for things to be sent to them from farther south, there is fine chocolate and ordinary chocolate. So obviously he was getting tired of all these people coming through and expecting to be fed hot chocolate. And they got the ordinary chocolate, and I suspect he kept the fine chocolate for himself. Okay, so now let's roll the video if we can. Unfortunately, the the audio is fairly faint, but I understand we've had some subtitles added, so maybe that'll make it easier for you to hear.
Okay, ready to start sharing. So here is Carolyn's. Oh, let me see, closed captions. Hold on just a second. I reset this every time and it doesn't seem to keep it.
And you can see I have my City of Gastronomy official apron on.
Oh, yes, in the photo. Yes, that's excellent. Okay, so yes, 75%. Okay, so that should do what we need. And here we go.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Neathhammer. My new book, A Desert Feast, Celebrating Tucson's Culinary Heritage, goes over 10,000 years of what people ate in the Santa Cruz Valley. Today, I'm going to make something from you. There aren't many recipes in that book, so I'm going to go back to my previous cookbook, Cooking the Wild Southwest, for this recipe. This recipe is going to include chia seeds, which I have already toasted and ground, something that was grown around this area, and amaranth, which was also grown. So we're going to pop some of the amaranth in this hot, and it has started popping right away. And I'm going to pop them out. Amaranth in its earlier stages had some nice green leaves, and that was something that was eaten by the locals. And then later on, it turned in, the seeds can be popped like this. Okay, then you want to make sure not to get them too brown, because then they'll burn and they will get bitter. So I grind them up. I keep a coffee grinder for this, but you can grind them in your blender as well. So they don't need to be a powder. You just need to grind them up a little bit. Okay, now I am going to add them to my already toasted and ground chia seeds. Here we go. Then we're going to add something that was also eaten by the ancients, and this is agave. Now, we're not going to roast our agave and make our own syrup today. We could, but we're going to use commercial agave syrup. And open it up and put a little bit in here just to make it enough of a paste that we can turn it into little balls. Oh, okay, maybe we need a little more. Okay, now, all right, it looks like, now it's going to be sticky, so you have to be careful. So here we're going to fashion a nice little ball. We're going to make another one. Okay. All right. Now, our final step is something that came a little later. It's when the Spanish came up and brought chocolate, which is a New World plant. So we're going to take these little balls that we've made and put them in. Now, these happen to be chocolate chips that I melted. So we can take them in there and put them in here, like just roll them around here. And then afterwards, you can put them in the fridge and they will firm up. And you'll have a wonderful treat that brings in all the flavors of the Santa Cruz Valley for many, many years. Thanks. And now I'd like to take you out to Catalina Brewing Company for my libation segment. They're making wonderful beers with edible wild plants. Tucsonans have been making their own beer since the 1860s. It might not have been great, but our desert town was thirsty. Today, a resurgent craft beer era has Tucson brewers using heritage ingredients like prickly pear, mesquite, chiles, and white Sonoran wheat to bring local flavors to their products. Hank Rowe, brewing partner at Catalina Brewing Company, incorporates flavors from his desert childhood in his beers. Hank, what have you got on tap here?
Well, Carolyn, I'm glad you asked. This is flagship La Rosa prickly pear cream ale. We have hand-picked prickly pears that go in there, and it's just a wonderful light drinker.
Oh, it looks fabulous. I'm going to take a.
Tastes even better too.
It's great. Tell me about some of the others.
Well, on tap right now, we have our fresh carved pumpkin porter, which has pumpkins picked fresh from the Marana pumpkin patch right up the road. We also have our seasonal beers, Mesquite Agave, which uses ground mesquite pods, as well as agave nectar. We have our Orange Dream Wheat, which incorporates not only the oranges that are familiar with the area, like with Orange Grove Road, but it also includes the Sonoran wheat that Father Kino brought into the area.
So Father Kino brought both citrus and white Sonoran wheat,
Absolutely.
European introductions,
Absolutely.
actually in about 1700. It's been around for a long time.
And that's why I like to use these local ingredients. I was a history teacher, but also living in the area. As a kid, I would grab the mesquite pods and suck on them like candy. When they got soggy, spit them out and grab another one. And it's that sense of the local flavor that I try to bring into our beers.
Well, this prickly pear is delicious. Is this the only beer you use prickly pear in?
We also have our Pink Monsoon, which is a wonderful summer seasonal that also includes the prickly pear to give it that pink hint. It's a hazy IPA and just a wonderful flavor.
Oh, these all sound delicious. And I certainly hope Tucsonans come up here and get to try some of these delicious beers. Thanks, Hank.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carolyn.
Hey, back to you, Carolyn.
Well, I do, for anybody who likes beer, of course, we're kind of being careful now. They have set up some outside picnic tables and expanded, so you could go up there and have a beer and be fairly safe. But you could also get something to take home. So either now or later, when we're all safer, do make your way up there. It's right off of Ina Road. And they have great beer, and it's a fun time up there.
Great. So are there any questions for Carolyn and Susie on the chat?
Oh, I unmuted and now I lost the questions. I'm not seeing them. Specifically, someone comments that they've seen a lot of desert chia in the superstitions. And then listing her book here. Oh, here it says, what was the name of that establishment?
Catalina Brewing.
Okay.
Catalina Brewing Company?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I'm sorry, my phone keeps ringing.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, I can't talk to you now.
Any other questions for Carolyn?
That's all that I'm seeing here.
Okay.
But if we miss any, we can also do them at the very end.
Okay, are we ready for Amy now? You need to unmute, Amy.
Can you hear me?
That's better.
Yeah, there she is.
Oops, a little bit better. Okay, there we go. So, thank you all. That was really nice. So yes, I'd like to also acknowledge that we're on Donatham and Apache land. And I'd like to thank all my teachers, including Martha, who I learned most of what I know from her. And I wouldn't be here on the blog if it wasn't for Carolyn for starting the blog. So Thank you to my great mentors. So I made for the dessert. Oh, and I love potlucks. I really, really love potlucks. So this was just kind of perfect. As Martha was saying, I make mole powders, which are all the chilies and spices and nuts and seeds ground together to make mole sauces at home. So you can make savory, chicken or turkey or vegetarian dishes, enchiladas, all kinds of other things. The very classic mole sauces for savory dishes, and that's been my business. But I love to play, so I make 6 different varieties, and I'll be using 2 of them tonight one in the dessert and one in the drink. So I made some brownies, which is basically I started off with a standard cocoa brownie recipe. Eggs and sugar and butter and cocoa powder and vanilla and flour. And then I added the mole dulce powder. So this is like 4 kinds of dark chili and raisins and dried bananas and almonds and sweet spices and savory spices and tons of handmade Oaxacan chocolate. And this is definitely our family's favorite one. My mom is watching. Hi, Mom. And she helped me to develop this recipe as best we can remember, as best using her memory for her grandmother's mole. So into the brownie batter, I put about 2/3 of this little container of powder and mixed it right in the batter, as well as seeds. So I used the barrel cactus seeds, the barrel cactus whistlezeni seeds, and they're just such it's a great place to start with for wild foods, because the harvesting window is so long, and they're readily available. It's not something that you injure the plant. You can collect just a little teeny bit, and they're also widely available across the city in people's yards. So it's and then I have I also added some chia seeds, the Salvia Kunbari, and this is really fun. Like someone was saying, that was a really good year for chia, and so this is the first year that I've collected wild chia. Even though I've seen it a lot, I would see just a little here and there. And so I got really familiar and used to using it in its cultivated form, like Carolyn had in that recipe, which is so. Oh, and also maybe Martha did too. In that. I think it might have been both. And so that's something that's really, really easy. If anyone has ever tried to, oops, that was amaranth. Oh, sorry. Anyway, I lost track. Sorry. Anyway, this is Salvia Kunbari, and they was a really good year for them, and it's a matter of only collecting when there's enough. So it's really important to respect the wild populations. The animals have to eat too, the plants have to reproduce, and of course collecting legally and not in protected areas, but even above and beyond collecting. Let's say you find some, let's say you have access to some private land where you can collect legally. You can also make sure you collect sustainably. So mix those seeds in to the batter, and then I also sprinkled the rest of the tin of mole powder and more of those seeds on the top. And if you don't have these, I just used like I said, the Pear, Cactus, Whistlesinii, and the Salvia Kunbari, but you could also use amaranth. You could use the amaranth, or I have some saguaro seed. If you don't have those, poppy seeds and chia seeds, sesame seeds, whatever you have. So I sprinkled them on the top, and then I bake the brownies, and then I cut them into pieces. And there they are. So so you can see that you probably can't see, that's too tiny, but I'll just let you know that the seeds are all throughout on and they're really beautiful on the top, and they add a nice crunch as well as nutrition. And then you've got the spice from the mole, and the maybe a little teeny bit of salt, a little saltiness and the savory, and plenty of sugar to go with the cocoa and the brownies. So that's pretty fun. Then, still going there, yeah, good. And then I made, and then for the drink, I made an atole de bellota. So atoles are hot drinks. So like a hot chocolate, but thicker and more substantial. So what I did was I started with water, but you can easily start with milk, like dairy milk or any other kind of milk, coconut milk or almond milk or rice milk or whatever you have like that. And then I used maseca, or an instant cornmeal that's been nixtamalized. It's been treated with lime, making the skins of the corn fall off and make them easier to grind. I mean, traditionally, and also makes the amino acid profile much more balanced and much better food for people. And so I use some of that corn masa mix, and you can readily find that. And if you don't have that, you can substitute. You could probably the first place I'd probably think to substitute would be cornstarch. That actually makes a really nice atole too. And then you could also just use the next ingredient, which is so exciting. So I have emery acorns, the Quercus emeryi, and they are so tasty. So you collect these in the summer, and then what I do is I start by cracking them. I put them. Well, this is actually my great grandmother's molcajete. This is like a mortar and pestle, and just because so many people ask, this is the metate. So it's a different shape and a different quantity of food that we would use for this for, and definitely for corn and for mole too. But anyway, for this little tiny batches, definitely the molcajete. So I just put a whole acorn in there, and I give it a little tap. These are nice and dry, but if for some reason they weren't dry, sometimes you have to toast them so that to make sure they fall apart. But honestly, it's always so dry. I'm very, very, I think I hadn't run into that once. I've heard people talk about it, but it's very rare. So then use my fingers to pry it open, and then you can see the whole the part that we're going to eat, the inside, so I have those in here, and then I just grind them. And it doesn't take as long as you think. When I was testing this recipe this week, I just sitting in the sun, and it just takes a few minutes pounding. And of course, this evening when I was dashing around, I used my coffee grinder, and I poured it right in the pan, and I found it unevenly ground. And so in the end, I ended up putting the whole thing in the whole drink in the blender. And so I guess that's another way. If you didn't want to grind first, you could cook, and then you could put it in the blender afterwards. So the Quercus emeryii is they're very low in tannins. And so they don't need to be, they're not bitter like a lot of other acorns are. And so they're good without any leaching, any other further processing. But if you only had another species of oak wherever you live, or you were in, let's say, you were in the city like Tucson or Phoenix, and you had an abundance of Quercus virginiana that are just everywhere, and they're completely being unused. So you could definitely harvest those the same way, and but they're very high in tannins. And so you would either take these whole pieces, the whole pieces of cracked seeds, or you could take the ground acorn meal, and either one, and put it in a jar of water and let it soak for a bit, and then strain off the water, maybe half an hour or so, and do that a few times until when you taste one, it doesn't taste bitter. And of course, from year to year, there's a wild variation of which trees you harvest from, and obviously genetics of the trees is wildly different in different populations, as well as people's taste buds and how much tannins they like or don't like to eat, what tastes bitter to people. So and then so I had the corn and the acorn, and then for the chocolate part, well, okay, so those any of those things, you've got the water thing, and you've got either corn and or acorn. Also, mesquite meal would be a great addition to this too. And for the chocolate part, I took cacao nibs, just like you could get from the health food store, but they come raw, which are pretty awful, and not awful. They're just don't taste like chocolate. So I toasted them briefly in a skillet, dry, just very briefly, until they turned shiny and smelled wonderful like chocolate. And then I ground those as well in the molcajete. And then I added some honey, some good local mesquite honey, and a chiltepin. So here's one here from my yard, the wild chili, the Capsicum annuum, the brisculum, apparently. Anyway, but this one is cultivated. This one is growing in my yard, and that's one thing I'd really like to stress is that growing wild plants in your yard is just one of the best things that to enrich your life, and as well as enrich your kitchen. And I ground that in there as well, and I cooked it all until the whole slurry got a little hot, got a little thick, and it's in here heating. And so this is just, I just can't stress, this is just this is a template. So any of those spices you could use or not use, but it is so comforting. I don't know why I forget every time how comforting it is. I have a super fond memory of my great aunt, and I like playing and figuring out how to make atole and with ingredients we had, and spicing it, and a little of this, sugar, chocolate, no chocolate, oh no, forget the sugar, we just want salt today. So like, and my grandmother would always serve it. It was really, normally you'd serve it in a nice mug, but I wanted you to really see what it looks like, because I can't find my clear mug, my glass mug, but you can just see it poured in there. It's thick.
It looks delicious.
Yeah.
And then the trick is to drink it with a spoon handy, so that as the particles settle, you can keep them suspended, and it's just it's so comforting. You just want to warm your hands on it and drink and enjoy. And then let's see, there was something else. Anyway, I'm probably out of time anyway. So if I saw there were some questions, but if I could go back, is there a way I can see on the chat? I'm not sure I can see on this device.
Susie will process the chat and ask you questions.
Oh, Susie, that would be the best. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. Well, there was some questions and discussion about the barrel cactus seeds. So one person asked if they had flavor or if they were mainly for texture and nutrition. And then another person said that they actually think the seeds don't have a lot of flavor, but they roast them with a little oil and salt. But there was a question too about how to get the seeds out of the fruit.
Great questions. Yes, it's mostly textural and nutritional. They're very mild. You could toast them to try to get more toasty flavors, but it's definitely mostly textural. So for collecting, and I just didn't have any available now, but you open a fruit, which can be either anywhere from yellow that's very fleshy, and as long as it comes off as long as you can just by wiggling the fruit, if it comes off easily, it's ready. Anywhere from very fleshy to completely dry. If you're just going for the seeds, if you're going for the yellow flesh, if you're gonna use the fruity, the outside part, that would be a whole different ingredient. But for just the seeds, you could probably collect them most of the year just by prying open the fruit and scraping out the seeds with a thumb or a spoon or something. It's just so intuitive. Just break it open and the seeds come right out.
What about glaucids though? Don't they have glaucids on them?
No.
No? Oh, well, that's good to know.
Or if they do, it's very few, not enough to bother. Not like a prickly pear or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I have glaucid phobia.
I understand.
Let's see. I think that most of the questions were about those, or almost all of them about those, the seeds, the barrel cactus seeds. And then I'm glad that you mentioned about collecting and picking, because we had talked about that before, the importance of doing that legally and sustainably.
Yeah, I just saw that question flash across too. To be totally honest, I'm sure that there are people here that, is there any way that somebody, I can't see all the hands, but like, I'm certain that there's some people here that know exactly where to collect legally.
Mhm.
And I would defer that question to them. If someone could.
In general, it's really not legal to collect in state parks or national parks. I'm not sure about county parks. But I think you would want to defer collecting in those locations, just partly because other people see you doing it, and then telescopes or starts to become more
Yeah.
widespread. So
I think generally it has to be on private land.
Mhm.
That's kind of the, there
That's
was,
what, exactly. That's the way to know very safe. But even, I would just like to really stress that even on private land, what's above and beyond that
Mhm.
is not harvesting when there isn't a bumper crop of something. So even when you find that private land, it's just so, I just cannot stress enough. I love that you can't just go to a grocery store and purchase these foods easily, because it's just something that's really, you know, to keep our wildlands wild and to make sure animals eat first, make sure plants can reproduce. And then I would also point people to Desert Harvesters, desertharvesters.org, that really stresses planting wild plants like barrel cactus and chiltepine in your yards, and ideally plants that need more water, like a chiltepine, in a water harvesting or earthwork, in a water harvesting basin, so that they can passively get the rainwater that they need, and we can have complete food forests within our city, and then we know that we can harvest those sustainably. We don't have to drive somewhere else. We know that we planted them and they're there for us. And then maybe even wild animals can, that are within the city, can eat those too.
great. Any more questions? Let's see.
You know, these are some questions that came up earlier. I think when Muffin was talking about the mesquite beans and collecting them on the ground. And I know you shouldn't pick them up off the ground. And someone thought that maybe you could get valley fever from them, but it's aflatoxin that is one thing that gets on the mesquite beans.
Let me go ahead and turn that over to Martha, because I could answer that, but if she can, because it was for her recipe, maybe we can open up the questions to more general to everyone. I mean, to all the three speakers.
Yeah, that's fine. And Martha, did you want to say something about that?
A real good point, a really good question, because it can be hazardous, really dangerous if there are aflatoxins in your mesquite beans. Juanita knew that you had to dry them immediately. She would always collect before the rains came, because as soon as the monsoon hits, the humidity goes up and fungi start, and aflatoxins are like the frass of fungi. What you don't want. Anyway, we know some good botanists who've actually gotten really sick by eating the moist pods off the ground that had been infected with fungi. So I mentioned how Juanita would spread out her, in the heat of June, spread out her mesquite pods out on hot ground, stony ground in the daytime, let them just bake actually on the ground, and then bring them into her ramada every night as soon as the sun went down, because even at night there'll be some dew fall. And so that consciousness is really important. You want to harvest before the monsoon. Now we do get a second harvest of mesquite pods. If there's a good monsoon, there'll be flowering and fruiting and pods happening in September and October. But that's really iffy unless you can keep them quite dry, harvest them quite dry. So yeah,
I might add that you should worry more about the aflatoxin than the stray antenna or leg that the Bruchid beetle leaves behind when he crawls out. That's the thing. Back in the day, we used to think that the pods were infected from the outside. And then as more research began doing, we realized that the mama Bruchid beetle lays her eggs on the flower. And these holes are the beetles eating their way out, not eating their way in.
Right.
So that's better.
There was a question back a
Oh,
little.
actually, if I could just back up to the, just to add to that as well. So it's to very specifically talk to that one person, that it's not that they're on the ground. There's the same dust that has the fungi spores are on the tree and on the ground, and it's just what Martha was saying about the rain part.
The humidity, yes.
Humidity.
Dry is the crucial thing.
Hmm.
Keeping them dry while they dry out.
Yeah.
That when they're green, they can get rained on. Like Martha was saying with the when that second the later summer harvest. All right, thank you.
There was another question earlier on in the chat, I think that probably got buried, Susie, about where in Tucson you could buy a metate or maybe a molajete.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Do any of you ladies know where you could get a?
Amy, do you have a good idea, or Carrie?
No,
I've seen
I would say it in South Tucson.
Right.
yeah, I've seen molcajetes at Food City and at what's the other one? A Super. And in Phoenix, I've seen them. I don't think it's called that anymore, but Pros Ranch. I used when that was a thing, and it used to be there. Metates, no, but molcajetes, yes.
I wonder if Native Seed Search ever has them.
Oh, they've had some instruments like kernelizing a corn cob, and they've had presses for making tortillas with corn masa. I don't remember there having any molcajetes or manos y metates. We used to get things like that in Nogales, and I don't know if those are still available, if any of the stores are available in these times, but it's worth checking as soon as COVID is over.
And then I guess finally, Lynn, someone has asked if it's possible to copy the questions to save them.
Yeah, I saw that from Deb Sparrow.
Okay.
There is a file I can hopefully retrieve and I'll send it to you.
Okay.
But Muffin, you wanted to sort of close us off with some final comments. So why don't you do that quickly and then we'll adjourn our meeting. And thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to toast all of you with my Mesquite sour, a squeeze of heirloom lemon, and a shot of bootleg agave juice. I want to thank.
Label again.
What's that?
I said, show us that label again on the.
That's a homemade. I had to get it across the border. But I thank the coordinators of this, the behind the scenes people, Lynn and Susie, thank you. And Carrie and Amy, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your creative ideas. And our mouths are all watering. I can hardly wait till technology invents scratch and sniff computers so that we can. Anyway, to everyone's good health, and cheers to all of you. Cheers to the plants that feed us. And I loved what Amy suggested about carrying these into our own gardens, appreciating them at close range. Good wishes to all of you. Happy solstice, good health.
Thank you, Martha and Carolyn.
Good night.
Yes.
And so thank you again to our presenters. That was fabulous.
It was terrific. We really
Yeah.
appreciated it. And it ends our year in a somewhat festive note. I will just say that I have prepared a PDF with the menus, with the recipes on it, and I posted it on the website, but it takes time sometimes for the website to sort of reload to browsers. And so I don't see it yet, but I'll check again tomorrow and I'll make sure those recipes go up as soon as I can get them functioning. But they should be up now and maybe some of you can see them. So enjoy. Happy holiday end of the year to everyone, and we will reconvene in January with a great talk by Jack Dash about his botanizing in the Tumacacori Highlands.
Oh, and I'm sorry, but I have to say it's Atascosa Highlands.
So
Yeah.
I'll wade into this and just quickly say that it's some folks call it the Tumacacori Highlands, and it is the Tumacacori EMA of the Coronado National Forest. But the Atascosas are kind of at the heart of it. So I tend to call it the Atascosa Highlands, but you can call it either of those and I'll be perfectly happy.
Okay. Well, we'll find out more in January then.
Yeah, that's a preview from our speaker. So nice to see you all. Thanks for joining us tonight and have a lovely end of the year.
Here's to our native plants.
Bye.
Cheers.
Hi, Rod. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Good wishes all.
Yes.
Good wishes.